Hi everyone, welcome back to Difference Frames the World, a channel that offers a unique perspective on global events. We analyze big international moves in straightforward words and upload videos daily. Here is Clara again. Nice to meet you on air. Today we are exploring a topic that is receiving intense scrutiny from governments around the world: the significant expansion of missile manufacturing and deployment infrastructure in China. This issue encompasses industrial capacity, strategic deterrence, regional concerns, and the risks associated with a global arms race. We will examine the evidence, discuss its implications for the region and the world, consider what China may be attempting to achieve, assess the risks involved, and explain why this matter is important. When a major power significantly increases its missile production, it often prompts reactions from other nations. As a result, these countries may feel compelled to bolster their own missile defenses, enhance their strike capabilities, or elevate their overall military readiness. This dynamic can contribute to a heightened risk of an arms race, as rival states seek to keep pace with or counterbalance the expanding military capabilities of the initiator. The evidence from satellite imagery underscores this escalating tension in the global security landscape. China is not just deploying more missiles, it is building out the factory, test, and support bases that will allow sustained production and deployment of very large missile inventories. The growth of missile production in China has several major strategic implications, some of which are short-term and others long-term. China is expanding its missile industry infrastructure not just for a one-off deployment but for sustained strike capacity. More factories suggest more missiles. More bunkers and test sites mean more readiness and potentially more deployment. In a conflict, especially one involving the Taiwan Strait, this gives China a larger budget of missiles to call upon, which strengthens its deterrent posture. In particular, analysts highlight the risk that, if China were to attempt a large-scale operation across the Taiwan Strait, the ability to saturate defenses with a large volume of missiles, both short, medium, and long-range ones, could degrade the ability of Taiwan and U.S. allies to respond effectively. In the so-called Indo-Pacific region, the U.S. and its allies, such as Japan, South Korea, and Australia, have long. Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan in early August 2022. USS Reagan immediately sailed back to Japan, staying away from the radius of Chinese missiles. However, when people find China is gearing up, the US, Japan, Australia, India, and other players will accelerate their own production, deployment, or missile defense systems, triggering a global arms race. The US is to restart nuclear tests, which is a signal of escalation. The expansion of missile industry infrastructure means more than just missiles. It means China is increasing its industrial base for strategic weapons. It can spill over into dual-use technologies, such as rocketry, space launch, hypersonics, and logistics. A hardened missile production and launch infrastructure also signals a long-term commitment to military modernization, which supports China's objective of becoming a world-class military power by mid-century, thereby protecting its global trade routes. One of the most commonly cited motivations for China's actions is its stance toward Taiwan. Beijing has long sought to signal that a military option remains on the table. Missiles give China a significant asymmetric advantage. A large number of rockets can threaten Taiwanese airfields, bases, logistics nodes, and importantly, can complicate any external intervention by the US or allies. Another interesting driver is the war in Ukraine, which has catalyzed a reassessment of how modern warfare is fought. China has noted that in high-intensity conflicts, missile and rocket fire is crucial, both for offensive and defensive operations. Some analysts suggest that China now believes that the operational requirements for any Taiwan contingency may require significantly more missiles than previously assumed to overwhelm the island's defenses and maintain tempo. Beyond Taiwan, China's missile buildup serves a broader signaling mission. In speeches and doctrinal statements, Beijing has emphasized that its rocket force is the heart of strategic deterrence and pillar of national security. The missile industry expansion underscores that intent. Finally, there is the logic of industrial readiness. Wars are won or lost in the margin of logistics. Having the capacity to produce hundreds or thousands of missiles means China can sustain a high-intensity campaign if needed, rather than relying on a short burst. The factories, bunkers, and test sites are investments. History often repeats itself. The victory of the Second World War relied on the robust military capabilities of the United States, and China is preparing itself to become a decisive factor in future conflicts, much like America was in the 1940s. China has short-range ballistic and cruise missiles aiming at regional targets, islands, bases, and forward operating areas, and it also has medium-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles, like the DF-61 Guam Killer, which reportedly has been associated with the expansions. China is also investing in its nuclear-capable missile force, the ICBMs, silo fields, and so on. When talking about China's rocket force, we cannot ignore the country's hypersonic weapons and mobile launchers. The Chinese rocket force also requires new production factories, and the expansion of existing ones to accommodate additional assembly halls, fabrication plants, and subcomponent manufacturing facilities. Of course, Beijing also needs more test centers, launch pads, storage bunkers, hardened facilities, silos, and support logistics, among other things. The expansion is not limited to one region. Analysts note both coastal and inland provinces are involved. That suggests redundancy and strategic depth. If an adversary hits one area, others remain operational. The build-out of China's missile infrastructure is not an isolated phenomenon. It has ripple effects across the Asia-Pacific and beyond. As already noted, Taiwan is the most proximate flashpoint. A more robust Chinese missile inventory increases the risk for the Taiwan separatists, especially if Beijing attempts military operations when uniting with the island. For U.S. forces and allies like Japan, Australia, and South Korea, the doubling of China's conventional missile capacity means that forward bases, early warning networks, and missile defense systems may come under sharper pressure. The U.S. has long outspent other states on missile defense, strategic deterrence, and readiness. Suppose China's missile industrial base is growing rapidly. In that case, the U.S. and its allies may feel heightened urgency to maintain a qualitative and quantitative edge in missiles, defense, early warning, resilience, and diplomacy. One of the key worries is that the exponential increase in missile inventories reduces crisis stability. It compresses decision times. It raises the risk of miscalculation or unintentional escalation. It reminds us of the Cold War missile buildup between the U.S. and the former Soviet Union. Though the actors and regional dynamics differ, the underlying logic is similar. However, today's China may have exceeded the former Soviet Union, as it does not need capital from the West to build its arsenal as the USSR did. It not only has the world's biggest consumer market and the world's only intact supply chain, but it also has enough talent from universities to fill key positions every year. Western analysts worry that China's expanding missile industry capacity has implications for proliferation. As capacity and production go up, the possibility of exporting missile technology directly or via third parties increases, raising concerns about regional missile proliferation in Southeast Asia and the Middle East, for instance. The U.S. military-industrial complex will face an invincible competitor when its customers find they can obtain the same or better equipment from China at a significantly lower price than from the United States. From the Chinese leadership's standpoint, expanding missile production could be framed as building our strategic deterrent and ensuring national security in a challenging environment. China often emphasizes that it is responding to external threats, such as the U.S. military presence, its alliances, and its defense cooperation with Taiwan, and that its forces are purely defensive as required. China does not publicly disclose the exact numbers of missiles, warheads, and production rates. And the pace and scale of expansion may differ across regions and missile types. As we pointed out several times, 2027 will be a critical year for the Chinese mainland and Taiwan to reunite. Beijing is not necessarily eager to take over Taiwan by force, but if Taiwan's independence elements choose to seek independence from Beijing, it will be a different case. Trump said Xi Jinping promised him not to attack Taiwan during his second term, which we hardly believe. It is more likely that Trump might abandon Taiwan if a war were to break out across the Taiwan Strait. If something happened there, increased missile capacity would give Beijing more ways to strike early and shape the theater. A missile saturation campaign might be launched, targeting airfields, ports, logistic hubs, and early warning radars. The enlarged industrial base means China might sustain follow-on launch waves. Despite the buildup, crisis dynamics may remain stable. China may utilize the expanded capacity for deterrence without crossing the threshold into actual conflict. The US and its allies may adjust and absorb the shift. In this scenario, the build-out enters a state of normalized strategic competition rather than war. With China's third aircraft carrier, the Fujian, in service, and the deployment of more advanced Type 055 destroyers and J-20 stealth fighters, China has already gained the upper hand in the so-called Indo-Pacific. Even if the US wants to match up, it is unlikely to do so, considering its shrinking military production capacity. The US and China could engage in dialogue about nuclear-capable missile build-out, strategic stability. Even if China is expanding, reducing the risk of miscalculation remains crucial. When she took power, one of his major goals was to modernize the People's Liberation Army into a world-class force by mid-century, with missiles serving as the tip of the spear. China has disclosed new missile systems over the past few years, including long-range mobile ICBMs, hypersonic glide vehicles, mobile launchers, and silo fields. For instance, the DF-61 intercontinental ballistic missile was publicly unveiled on September 3, 2025, in the military parade to mark the 80th anniversary of China's anti-Japanese war. China's overall rocketry and space sector is growing, which means some of the infrastructure may serve dual roles, civil and military. It complicates transparency and arms control efforts. For the Chinese side, the leaders view the US pivot to Asia, naval fleets, and alliances as threats to China's national security. They believe they might face a use-it-or-lose-it moment over Taiwan. They accumulate missiles and build factories because they believe that being able to strike first, strike hard, and strike more is their best way to deter or win. For them, missile build-out is a hedge. It raises the price for adversaries to intervene. China is not standing still when it comes to missiles. The infrastructure growth, the doubling of production capability pace, and the geographic breadth of sites all indicate a paradigm shift. China has a vast land, ocean and 1.4 billion people to protect, and it is surrounded by hostile neighbors who used to plague the country multiple times in history. It is not a big deal for Beijing to sharpen its teeth, and the world will get used to it.